Hello, I've been asked to make my homemade crust recipe, and today we're gonna make it in an apple pie. So what you first need is 3 cups of sifted flour. I've put 3 cups in here. My sifter broke, but you can sift by giving it a stir with a whisk. So I'm sifting it real quick. It's all-purpose flour. Really, it comes pre-sifted anyhow, but my mom always sifted it. There we go. Then we need 1½ teaspoons of salt. I've put that right here. We need a pinch of baking powder. This is the magic ingredient that makes the dough pliable and spread right out like Play-Doh. You don't want to miss this. It's baking powder, not baking soda. You need just a pinch. It's crazy magical how just a pinch does it. So there's just a pinch that I'm spreading. My nails prevented me from getting a good pinch, so just a pinch. Now we're gonna stir that. The next thing we need is 3/4 plus just a little bit more of vegetable oil. So I use this kind of measure cup so I can look down in it. 3/4 is 3/4 of a cup is right there. So I'm gonna go between 3/4 and 1 cup of vegetable oil. Next, we need 1/2 cup of milk. You want your milk to be cold, so I did not get that out ahead of time. Here's my 1/2 cup of milk. You want to use a fork. Pour the 1/2 cup milk into your oil and just stir. It won't really mix up really well, but it will mix up a little bit. I like to put my flour in a 4-quart measure cup because it's exactly the right size that I need. So I'm gonna pour my flour, salt, and baking powder mixture in there. Now I'm going to stir and stir. Stir as you go and mix it around. And just stirring and mixing. You just want to mix that up with a fork. You do not need to beat it with a beater or a blender. So once it gets pretty well mixed up like that, I use my hands. My hands are clean, washed before I started, and I just knead that with my fist, like that. I flip it over once or twice, and I can feel that it's nice and pliable. I'm gonna just flip it a little bit to get all that flour mixed in there. You don't wanna overwork your dough because you want your crust to be fluffy and kind of crispy. So it really, really looks like Play-Doh, softer than Play-Doh really. So next, you want to work that out on waxed paper. So you're gonna need 2 sheets of this. This makes a top crust and a bottom crust, so I'm gonna just cut that right in half. See, I just pulled it in half. Put that in there. Put the other one there. I'm going to put, this is clean, it's been moistened. It is a wet dishcloth over that. You don't want your dough to get dried out. You need a rolling pin. First, I'm just gonna flatten what I have out onto like that. And I'm going to get another sheet of waxed paper. This would not work so easily without that baking powder in there. It's the baking powder that makes it work so well. And I'm just going to roll it out nice and flat. I've made the mistake before of not rolling it enough, and when you don't roll it enough, it makes a real thick crust on the bottom. Now, I love the flavor of this crust, and I like a thick crust around the edge. I'll show you how I do that. But really, the real thick crust on the bottom was not a good idea. I think when that happened, I was making a pumpkin pie, and it didn't even slice well. So you really want to make sure you have that nicely flattened out and rolled out. Like so. This is just a regular standard 8-inch, got a little crust on it, 8-inch pie dish. I do not like the deep dish because the deep dish takes a little more finagling with the crust, and it takes a little more filling, and I didn't learn that way. I just use regular one. So you're going to peel that top right off. It's the baking powder that makes that work. If you didn't have baking powder, it wouldn't work. I mean, it still works. You can do it. It just doesn't work as smoothly. Now, I'm just going to quickly flip this up and over onto that plate. I kind of just center it as best as I can. I'm just centering it, and then I'm going to peel this off. Like so. Next, I want to make my crust. Now, my mom always cut all the excess crust off. Then she used a fork to just go around and pinch the edges down. I've learned to do it just a little bit of a different way. I really, really like the crust. It tastes really, really good. So I like to keep all my crust, unless there was a lot. Once in a while, for whatever reason, maybe a little much more flour, or maybe I rolled it a little thinner, and in that case, there might be quite an overhang, and I guess I don't need too much, but I like a nice thick crust. So I'm gonna take these pieces and just kind of fold them over to give myself something to work with. And I'm kind of filling in. There was just a little blank spot there. I'm just running my fingers along the bottom to get that crust. Kind of work it and patch it in. If you've ripped your crust on the bottom, you can take a little bit of crust and patch it in. Okay. Kind of just put it into the crease of the dish. Once you do that, you're pretty good to go there. Next, I take a fork. Some people don't do this, and you put holes in the crust. That helps it to not shrink and pull up. You can also, if you want, do it on the sides. Depends on what you're making. If I'm making pumpkin pie, I really do that and make sure it's got a lot of holes. This is gonna be an apple pie. So, you probably have your own apple pie recipe. If you don't, I can quickly tell you what I did. I took 6 Gala apples. Usually I use a mix of apples, all kinds of like Fuji and Gala and a Granny Smith and Pink Ladies. But I went to the store and they didn't have that. They just had a bag of Galas. So Galas are good for baking, so I used that. I sliced them very thin. You want all your apple slices to be evenly sliced. I sliced them really thin, set those aside. In a saucepan, I mixed 6 tablespoons of butter with a 1/2 cup white sugar, a full cup of brown sugar, and a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 cup of water. Stir it all up, bring it to a boil, dump the apples in. The reason why you want to pre-bake your apples is so that your apple pie gets done all the way, because we're going to bake this. But if you put in raw apples, sometimes they're crunchy. Some people want them crunchy. Some people want a little bit of a crunchy apple pie, so then you'd want to skip that step. You just want to mix all that up, put your raw apples in, and pour that mixture over it. but my family likes a little bit softer apples, so I bring it to a boil and let it boil 3 to 4 minutes till they feel a little bit soft. I'm going to pour this in my pie now. If you're making a caramel apple pie, I use this exact same recipe, but I decrease the white sugar by a little bit, and I put in a 1/4 cup of Sanders Sanders caramel topping for ice cream, and I mix that right in there. Then once I make my top crust, I drizzle some more caramel over the top, and that makes a yummy caramel apple pie. You can add nuts to that if you want. I gotta wash my hands. But this is just gonna be a plain apple pie. Oh, there's also a tablespoon of lemon in that mixture. So it's lemon and cinnamon, butter, water, white sugar, brown sugar. So there's also that in there. And when I do a caramel apple pie, I decrease my lemon juice to a half instead of a full. But that's just a taste. You could do whatever you want. Okay, we're going to get more wax paper. Apparently fell out. Just kind of rolled away from me. We're gonna do the same thing for the top crust. Remember, I had my crust sitting aside, and I put a wet cloth over it so that it doesn't dry out, because if it gets dry, it's just a little bit less pliable and harder to work with. So I'm just pressing it out. We're gonna do the same thing. All of this. So it's kind of uniform. You want it bigger than your pie plate because you want some crust to fold over and work with. Here, I'm going to just peel that top piece off. I'm going to turn this a little bit so I can flip it into my pie. I have to get kind of fast because otherwise it would probably spill out. So I just peel it off like this. Peeling off the edges. Some people get fancy and they make lattice crust. I've also seen where you can get like cookie cutters and make shapes. I have thought of doing that, like Christmas shapes. That would be kind of fun. Haven't done it, but I saw some online and I thought that might be kind of fun. Okay, so remember how I like to keep my crust, and I want a nice thick edge. So I'm just taking a little off, but I'm making sure that I have a nice thick edge. It's a little sparse right there. I'm going to take a little bit of this dough and put it in. It's a real tasty dough. Okay, now it's nice and thick, but you have to seal the edges. If you don't seal the edges, pinch and seal, it will kind of explode out all over your oven. It makes a big mess, you lose all your goodies, and that's not good. So here's what I do. Just make sure that's clean all the way around. I just use my fingers and I pinch, press, twist, pinch, press, twist, pinch, press, twist. I'm just pinching, pressing, twisting ever so little bit, and it just makes a nice edging on that pie, and it's sealing it all around. Again, my mom used to just take a fork and we just press down, and then it just had fork marks. That's fine too. You don't have to do this, but this just makes a real pretty edge when it bakes. And then the edges, the part that's kind of sticking up, they get kind of a toasty brown, and I like that. I like that flavor. Now I'm just kind of sealing it. I'm kind of pressing in to make sure that we're sealed. Now if this were a caramel apple pie, this is where I would heat a little bit of that Sanders ice cream caramel topping. in like this cup, and I just drizzle it over the top. But this is not a caramel apple pie. It's a regular apple pie with cinnamon and lemon and things like that. So, but either way, to either pie, you first take a beaten egg, put a little splash of milk in there. I accidentally put 2 eggs in here. Don't need 2, you only need 1 if you're just doing 1 pie. And then you just spread that around the crust. The reason why you do that is it's gonna give the crust some nice, crispy, brown, not crunchy like burn, but it's going to just make it crispy and brown and pretty. So I did that. Then I take some cinnamon sugar because it's a regular cinnamon lemon apple pie. It's not a caramel apple pie. And I sprinkle cinnamon sugar on the top. This is just a store-bought mixture of cinnamon sugar. You could certainly make your own. Lastly, very important, you want to take a sharp knife. Don't forget this step. You want to cut holes in your pie. The reason is because if you don't, when the ingredients cook in there, they'll start to boil. They will kind of explode all over, and that won't be good for your oven, and you lose all your goodies and all kinds of things. Now I've got a little too much liquid, and it's kind of coming out the top. Probably because I was talking instead of paying attention. So when I poured my mixture in there, I probably didn't need as much liquid. I probably could have spooned the apples and spooned it over. It's just gonna make it yummy, but it's also gonna make it, it's just making it a little bit wetter than it needed to be. I put this in a 400-degree oven for 15 minutes, then 375 for 35 to 45 till it gets nice and brown and looks delicious. And that's all there is to it. So hope this was helpful, and maybe I can post a picture when I'm done. Thanks.